مولا حسين يا مولا يا مولا يا 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 مولا Thirsty Ruqayya, thirsty Abdullah, we just need water, Father some water, where's your flag bearer, where's your flag bearer, son of Fatima, son of Fatima, Hussein ya Mawla ya Mawla ya Mawla, Hussein ya Mawla ya Mawla ya Mawla, Hussein ya Mawla ya Mawla ya Mawla, Hussein ya Mawla ya Mawla ya Mawla. Hussein's all alone. Shahqasim has gone. Ali Akbar's gone. Abu Fadil's gone. Even Abdullah. Even Abdullah. Hussein wa wayla. Hussein wa wayla. Hussein ya Mawla ya Mawla ya Mawla. 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 Zainab cries Allah. Where's Saba Abdullah? Where's Ali Akbar? Where is Abdullah? Where's my Alam Dar? Where's my Alam Dar? Where's my flag bearer? Where's my protector? Where is my Abbas? Where is my Abbas? Hussein ya Mawla ya Mawla ya Mawla. 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 Now the tent's on fire, shackled Ruqayya. Zainab you have seen, Zainul Abidin, Ilan locked in chains, Ilan locked in chains. Zahra cries in pain, my Hussein is slain. Where is my Hussein? Where is my Hussein? Hussein ya Mawla ya Mawla ya Mawla. 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 You're held on a spear, my eyes filled with tears. Your body trampled, why were they so cruel? And it still hurts me, and it still hurts me that you died thirsty, that you died thirsty. Hussein ya Mawla ya Mawla ya Mawla. 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 Zahra cries Hussein, Zainab cries Hussein, my tears cry Hussein, my heart cries Hussein. Hussein cries out last, Hussein cries out last. Where is my Abbas? Where is my Abbas? Abbas flag bearer, flag bearer, flag bearer. 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 Children cry in thirst. Where is my Abbas? Abbas cries in pain. Children, I've been slain. I can't bring water. I can't bring water. For you Ruqayya, for you Ruqayya. Abbas flag bearer, flag bearer, flag bearer. 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 Cries of Al-Atash, but I am Abbas. I will bring water for Hussein's daughter, but they've ambushed me, but they've ambushed me. Master forgive me, Master forgive me. Abbas flag bearer, flag bearer, flag bearer. 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 He won't quench his thirst. Hussein comes first with his arms cut off. Still won't taste a drop. Blinded by arrow, blinded by arrow. I cry in sorrow, I cry in sorrow. Abbas flag bearer, flag bearer, flag bearer. 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 Women and children were slapped and beaten. Children cry in fear. Zainab full of tears. Oh my brother dear, oh my brother dear. I wish you were here. I wish you were here. Abbas flag bearer, flag bearer, flag bearer. 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 Saviors of Islam, I send my salam upon you, Master. When I drink water, all my love for you and my life for you, I will beat my chest. I will never rest. I will give my life. I will sacrifice in my life always. In my life always. Your flag is raised high. Your flag is raised high. Hussein, Ya Mawla, Ya Mawla, Ya Mawla. Abbas flag bearer, flag bearer, flag bearer. Hussein, Ya Mawla, Ya Mawla, Ya Mawla. Abbas flag bearer, flag bearer, flag bearer. Ya Mawla, Ya Mawla, Ya Mawla. Abbas flag bearer, flag bearer, flag bearer. Hussein, Ya Mawla, Ya Mawla, Ya Mawla. Abbas flag bearer, flag bearer, flag bearer.
Horona shahid, horona shahid, horona shahid, horona shahid, shahid, horona shahid, horona shahid, horona shahid, horona shahid, shahid, horona shahid, horona shahid, horona shahid, horona shahid, shahid, horona shahid, horona shahid, horona shahid, horona shahid, shahid. Is there anyone to guide me? Is there anyone to guide me? Anyone to stand in my place? Anyone to stand in my place? Any voice to speak out loud, to direct me to the right place, to direct me to the right place. From the other camp I hear Allah, from the other camp I hear Adhan, from my camp cheering and song. Oh, is it so hard to choose? Oh, is it so hard to choose? Horona shahid, horona shahid, horona shahid, horona shahid, shahid, horona shahid, horona shahid, horona shahid, horona shahid, shahid. The adhan of Fajr Valley, the adhan of Fajr Valley Akbar cuts through the desert morning, cuts through the desert morning. Why does it make me restless? Why does it make me restless? I swear this is Rasul's voice. I swear this is Rasul's voice. By Allah, this is Rasul's face. By Allah, this is Rasul's face. Oh Allah, take me to his place. Oh, is it so hard to choose? Oh, is it so hard to choose? Horona shahid, horona shahid, horona shahid, horona shahid, shahid, horona shahid, horona shahid, horona shahid, horona shahid, shahid. The intense heat of the desert, the intense heat of the desert presses down into my spirit, presses down into my spirit. It is nothing but coolness when I hear the cries of children ringing in the afternoon sky, the cries of a small baby, the cries of a small baby, like a spear pierces my heart. Oh, is it so hard to choose? Oh, is it so hard to choose? Horona
شهيد حرنا شهيد حرنا شهيد حرنا شهيد شهيد حرنا شهيد حرنا شهيد حرنا شهيد حرنا شهيد
Shahid Hussein delays the battle. Hussein delays the battle. Why did he ask for one day? Why did he ask for one day? He expects a special visitor, galloping across the desert, galloping across the desert, like slaves blindfolded hands tied, like slaves blindfolded hands tied. So ashamed he was and he cries, so ashamed he was and he cries. He falls onto his chest. Oh, or was it so hard to choose? Oh, or was it so hard to choose?
حرنا شهيد حرنا شهيد حرنا
شهيد حرنا شهيد شهيد حرنا
شهيد حرنا شهيد حرنا شهيد حرنا شهيد
Shahid Hussein lifts up his wet face. Hussein lifts up his wet face. This commander of the enemy, this commander of the enemy, hugs him, welcomes him warmly. He who blocked off the water, he who stopped him from escaping. How can I lift my face up? How can I lift my face up? How can I look into your eyes? How can I look into your eyes? Oh, may Allah bless you. Oh, you are free in both worlds. Oh, you are free in both worlds.
حرنا شهيد حرنا شهيد حرنا شهيد حرنا شهيد شهيد حرنا شهيد حرنا شهيد حرنا شهيد حرنا شهيد شهيد حرنا شهيد حرنا شهيد حرنا شهيد حرنا شهيد شهيد حرنا شهيد حرنا شهيد حرنا شهيد حرنا شهيد
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.
محمدا وعجل فرجهم ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله. السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله. السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين وابن سيد الوصيين. والسلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا ثار الله وابن ثاره والوتر الموتور. السلام عليك وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار. يا أبا عبد الله، يا أبا عبد الله، يا أبا عبد الله، يا أبا عبد الله. لقد أظمت الرزية وجلت عظمة المصيبة بك علينا وعلى جميع أهل الإسلام. وجلت وعظمت مصيبتك في السماوات على جميع أهل السماوات. فلعن الله أمة أسست أساس الظلم والجور عليكم أهل البيت. ولعن الله أمة دفعتكم عن مقامكم وأزالتكم عن مراتبكم التي رتبكم الله فيها. ولعن الله أمة قتلتكم. ولعن الله الممهدين لهم بالتمكين من قتالكم. برئت إلى الله وإليكم منه ومن أشياعهم وأتباعهم وأوليائهم. يا أبا عبد الله، يا أبا عبد الله، يا أبا عبد الله، يا أبا عبد الله. إني سلم لمن سالمكم وحرب لمن حاربكم إلى يوم القيامة. ولعن الله آل زياد وآل مروان. ولعن الله بني أمية قاطبة. ولعن الله ابن مرجان. ولعن الله عمر بن سعد. ولعن الله شمرا. ولعن الله أمة أصرجت وألجمت وتنقبت لقتالك. بأبي أنت وأمي لقد عظم مصابي بك، فأسأل الله الذي أكرم مغامك وأكرمني بك أن يرزقني طلب ثارك مع إمام منصور من أهل بيت محمد صلى الله عليه وآله. اللهم اجعل لي عندك وجيها بالحسين عليه السلام في الدنيا والآخرة. يا أبا عبد الله، يا أبا عبد الله، يا أبا عبد الله، يا أبا عبد الله، إني أتقرب إلى الله وإلى رسوله وإلى أمير المؤمنين وإلى فاطمة وإلى الحسن وإليك بموالاتك وبالبراءة ممن أسس أساس ذلك وبنى عليه بنيانا وجرى في ظلمه وجوره عليكم وعلى أشياعكم. برأت إلى الله وإليكم منه وتقربوا إلى الله ثم إليكم بموالاتكم وموالاة وليكم وبالبراءة من أعداءكم والناصبين لكم الحق وبالبراءة من أشياعهم وأتباعهم. إني سلم لمن سالمكم وحرب لمن حاربكم وولي لمن والاكم وعدو لمن عاداكم. فأسأل الله الذي أكرمني بمعرفتكم ومعرفة أوليائكم ورزقنا البراءة من أعدائكم أن يجعلني معكم في الدنيا والآخرة وأن يثبت لي عندكم قدم الصدق في الدنيا والآخرة. وأسأله أن يبلغني المقام المحمود لكم عند الله وأن يرزقني طلب ثاري مع إمام هدى مهدي ظاهر ناطق بالحق منكم. وأسأل الله بحقكم وبالشان الذي لكم عنده أن يعطيني بمصابكم أفضل ما يعطي مصابا بمصيبته مصيبة ما أعظمها وأعظم رزيتها في الإسلام وفي جميع السماوات والأرض. اللهم اجعلني في مقامي هذا ممن تناله منك صلوات ورحمة ومغفرة. اللهم اجعل محياي محيا محمد وآل محمد ومماتي ممات محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إن هذا يوم تبركت به بنو أمية وابن آكلة الأكباد اللعين ابن اللعين على لسانك ولسان نبيك صلى الله عليه وآله في كل موطن وموقف وقف فيه نبيك صلى الله عليه وآله. اللهم لعن أبا سفيان ومعاوية ويزيد بن معاوية عليهم منك اللعنة أبد الآبدين. وهذا يوم فرحة بقيان زياد وآل مروان بقتلهم الحسين صلوات الله عليه. اللهم فضاعف عليهم اللعنة منك والعذاب الأليم. اللهم إني أتغرب إليك في هذا اليوم وفي موقفي هذا وأيام حياتي بالبراءة منهم واللعنة عليهم وبالموالاة لنبيك وآل نبيك عليه وعليهم السلام. اللهم لعن أول ظالم ظلم حق محمد وآل محمد وآخر تابع له على ذلك. اللهم لعن العصابة التي جاهدت الحسين والشايعات وبايعات وتابعت على قتله. اللهم لعنهم جميعا. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعلك الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. اللهم خص أنت أول ظالم باللعن مني، وابدأ به أولا ثم الثانية والثالثة والرابعة. اللهم لعن يزيد خامسا، ولعن عبيد الله بن زياد وابن مرجان وعمر بن سعد وشمران وآل أبي سفيان وآل زياد وآل مروان إلى يوم القيامة. سجدة. اللهم لك الحمد حمد الشاكرين لك على مصابهم. الحمد لله على عديم رزيتي. اللهم ارزقني شفاعة الحسين يوم الغروب، وثبت لي قدم صدق عندك يا مع الحسين، وأصحاب الحسين الذين بذلوا مهجهم دون الحسين عليه السلام.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين وأصحابه المنتجبين، ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. اللهم كل وليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك توعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين عليهم السلام. السلام عليك يا أبا صالح المهدي عجل الله تعالى فرجه الشريف. My dearest brothers and sisters, respected scholars, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. As we continue our discussion on the secrets or the keys of the perseverance of the Husseini movement. Last night we presented some introductory points, and we addressed 2 of the 7 fundamental points that not only helps us understand why the Husseini movement perseveres, how the Mahdawi movement operates now, but also provides us with a point of reflection of how our efforts to effect justice, to effect the restoration of human dignity must include these elements. And in our appraisal of our efforts right now, we revisit, to what extent these elements are there. So the first of them, we said, is the will of Allah. And we reminded ourselves through Quranic verses that the will of Allah is indeed for the movement of Imam al-Hussein to have been victorious, that it was victorious, and that it continues to be victorious, and that the movement now, in the leadership of the Imam of our time, may Allah hasten his reappearance, is a movement that is, was, and will be victorious. So it is a reminder and brings a sense of comfort, but also confidence in the hearts of the believers that may find themselves overwhelmed by the pervasive influence and presence of evil in the world, and sometimes where they feel that the battle is lost before it's even begun because of the scope and complex nature of the imperial establishment. We must remind ourselves that the will of Allah is that those who are fighting for the rekindling and the restoration of human dignity and for the establishment of justice as it's understood in Islamic teaching and all divine teachings, they are the victorious group. There is no doubt about that. We really need that, I think. In a time like this, we are certain of that in the reappearance of our Imam. May Allah hasten his reappearance, but we must be reminded that that victory is extended even until now, and that we don't have to await for the victory, but of course that the ultimate victory, the epitome of victory, will come with the presence and reappearance of our Imam. So that should give us some confidence, and that should give us, I think, some motivation and spirit to continue working and struggling in this path, that perhaps there is nothing more worthwhile in life than to commit oneself to this cause, and to know without a shadow of a doubt that we are victorious and we shall see that victory. That was the first point. We drew parallels from the example of Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam in the Quran, and how Imam al-Hussein and what he's done shares those parallels. And what was important was that Abrahamic dua, that وَجْعَلْ لِي لِسَانَ صِدْقٍ فِي الْآخِرِينَ, that make me not only of a worthy repute among the posterity, but also for those who remember me, their remembrance of me is precise, it is authentic, and it corresponds to my intentions and my mission and my vision. That was the first point. The second point was the concept of righteous action, amalun salih. And we explained how amalun salih is a category of action that is distinguished from what we call good action. It's something more than that. It's something that it corresponds to the divine decree. And we gave the example of the son of Nuh alayhi salam, that what it means really to manifest amalun salih is to identify and then act on those obligations that Allah has made obligatory, that correspond to the circumstances of our lives and the context in which we are living in. And even though there may be alternatives, sometimes those alternatives, just like in the case of the son of Nuh, they are described as being amalun ghayru salih, the personification of unrighteous action, even though his course of action, as I mentioned last night, if we reflect on it in society, it was not a unreasonable or an irrational alternative course of action. But the Quran is very clear and distinct in that not only was that a poor choice, but it is a choice that is deemed unacceptable, and it's the exact opposite of what amalun salih is. So one thing to remember is that for us as not only lovers and sympathizers of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam and Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, that action, that producing some action after having been inspired by this teaching and by this guidance and this instruction, that is of course critical. And of course, more than that is not just the production of some action, it is action that constitutes amalun salih, righteous action. So we know in the riwayat what that means really is to be mu'min, because we said iman and amalun salih go hand in hand. And we see in accounts from the Ahlul Bayt that they make clear for us. For example, in a riwayah from Imam Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, it is narrated, إِنَّا لَا نَعُدُّ الرَّجُلَ مُؤْمِنًا حَتَّى يَكُونَ لِجَمِيعِ أَمْرِنَا مُتَّبِعًا مُرِيدًا, that we do not count any individual, any man or woman, as a mu'min truly until they happen to be obedient to the entirety of our orders and a partisan. أَلَا وَإِنَّ مِنِ اتِّبَاعِ أَمْرِنَا وَإِرَادَتِهِ, and know indeed that among our obedience to our orders and wanting it, is al-wara', is the devoutness. فَتَزَيَّنُوا بِهِ يَرْحَمُكُمُ اللَّهِ, so adorn yourselves with it, may Allah have mercy on you. وَكَبِّدُوا أَعْدَاءَنَا بِهِ يَنْعَشْكُمُ اللَّهِ, and inflict pain on our enemies by it, may Allah invigorate you. So al-wara' here is presented as a central concept of being obedient to the instruction of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salatu wasalam. And the devoutness, al-wara', devoutness, again, it's a loose translation. What it means again is to fully commit oneself to their religious obligations, to those things that would constitute amalun salih. So adorn yourself with it, number one, but also the result of it, as we mentioned last night, that it should inflict some pain. It should make some progress to the ends of restoration of human dignity and towards the restoration of justice in its true sense. It's not just about, again, like we said last night, about doing some good. It is about doing a good that ensures that some ground is gained through that action in restoring the rights of individuals and in winning back essentially that those rights or that land. We gave an example from Surah At-Tawbah, verse 120, that says that amalun salih, really what it results in is ولا يطؤون موطئا يغيظ الكفار ولا ينالون من عدو نيلا إلا كتب لهم به عمل صالح. That they do not tread any ground enraging the faithless, nor do they gain any ground against an enemy, but a righteous deed is written for them on that account. So again, one of the ways that we see whether amal salih has been manifested is that this advancement occurs, and there is a feeling of, if you want to call it pain or if you want something, there has to be something felt on the side of the oppressor that means that some progress is being made. I'll give two examples of what I think commitment in providing amal salih looks like. We spoke about slacktivism last night. What is the opposite of that? So this is an account from the life of Imam Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam. Like many of the Imams and the Ahlul Bayt, of course, they were individuals who provided for those who were in need in society, regardless of whether they understood or appreciated their position as leaders, their position in the cosmos, and the reverence and respect that was due to them. This is one account that is narrated from a companion of the Imam by the name of Mu'alla ibn Khunais, a very interesting and important figure. He narrates that it was in one night, and in this account it says that actually the weather was inclement, it was raining, or just the weather was not good. Imam Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam was kind of he was moving towards a region within Medina, and he's saying in this account that he's actually moving towards the Saqifa Bani Sa'ida. So he says that I saw the Imam making this movement, this trip at night. It drew my attention, so I began following him. And as I followed him, I saw that something fell from the person of the Imam. And as I kind of went to retrieve it, the Imam acknowledged my presence, and he said, "By the name of Allah, O God, return what has fallen to me." So Mu'alla is saying, I go to the Imam and I say salam, I introduce myself, and the Imam says, "Mu'alla, is that you?" And he says, "Yes, it's me. May I be, sacrificed for you." And the Imam saying, "Mu'alla, start looking, and look with your hand," because it was so dark, things were not visible then. So he says, "Mu'alla, kind of through the sense of touch, start touching the ground and see if you can recover the thing that had fallen." So he said, "If you find something, give it to me." So Mu'alla says that I started looking and I found just pieces of bread that were, cooked obviously. And the more I found, I returned them to the Imam, and the Imam would put it in a kind of like a bag or sack that he had. Before I knew it, it was full of bread. So I asked him, "May I be sacrificed for you? Will you allow me to carry the bag for you?" And he says, "No." And the Imam refused, and he said that I am more worthy of an action like this. But in any case, he told Mu'alla, "Accompany me." So he says we arrived at this place. In this account, saying that Mu'alla is saying that it is that Saqifa Bani Sa'ida, and over there was a group of people that were sleeping. The Imam goes to each of them, and he puts one piece of bread or a couple pieces of bread either underneath them or next to their possessions, and he's going from person to person until he exhausts all the bread that he has with him. So Mu'alla asks him, he says that these people, do they know the truth, the haqq? It means, do they understand and acknowledge your position or our position? And the Imam says, no, if they knew that in addition to the bread, we would also offer them some salt, which means that we would have added something to that. And then he begins to explain. He said that indeed Allah has, from whatever has been created, there is a determined amount. And from that determined amount, the sadaqah, the charity needs to be given. And this is essentially what I'm doing here. So I'm making sure that is extended to them. This this example of Imam Sadiq with Mu'alla narrating, this is something very characteristic of the Imams, that not only do they acknowledge that there's a problem there, but even when it doesn't serve their purpose, which means it doesn't increase them in notoriety, it doesn't draw attention to them, it doesn't increase their brand, it's not, it doesn't qualify as publicity. The Imams are doing it for the fact that it needs to be done. So we spoke about, slacktivism yesterday, or any sort of engagement where support is lent, but it's something that involves either little effort, little commitment, and it makes the person feel good about what they're doing instead of actually trying to address a root problem, regardless of how it makes a person feel. And the Imams here are saying that they may not even know who I am. They may not acknowledge that, divine guidance has been entrusted to us as the Ahlul Bayt. Regardless of that, they're still worthy of that charity, of that dignity, and because of that, I lend that support. So we have countless examples of things like this that the Imams are telling us. And this is an account that's narrated by his wife. She says that, my husband and I, both of us, were students, more or less, of one of the great teachers of akhlaq in contemporary memory in Iran, in Tehran, in Qom, and other places, by the name of Ayatollah Khoshbakht. So he says that I have a few memories of my husband. He says that he was committed to his work. And in some ways, I guess we can describe him as being a workaholic. And the nature of his work was just very tough. He said, whenever I saw my husband, it's like he was just perpetually fatigued, just always tired, exhausted. There were bags under his eyes. But at the same time, he was always composed in his demeanor. I never saw him. I don't know if this is an exaggeration, but she said, I never saw him angry. I never saw him lose his composure. Even when he would come home sometimes around or past midnight, he always entered the house with a positive attitude and with good spirits. And he wouldn't more or less bring his stresses or anxieties of work into the house with him. He made sure that the home was a safe space. But in any case, she said that his work was so taxing, and I would put up with it, but from time to time I would also become a little peeved, and I would tell him, you're working too much. You're working too much, and it's affecting you. It's affecting your health. It's not normal. It's not healthy, and it'll have a toll. And I can understand this. I had a teacher of mine, loosely, but he was a teacher of one of my teachers that I'd visited on a number of occasions, and I had great respect for him. Very kind individual, very learned individual. He was so overworked. Like, he would travel from city to city, and he worked primarily with university students. Great learned man, but he was always traveling. And he would travel by car most of the time. That, in his early 50s, in one of these travels, he has a heart attack and he dies. So there are people that are they work so hard and so committed to their work that really, their bodies just can't keep up with them. The wife of Shaheed Mustafa Ahmed Roshan saying that this is what I was afraid of. So I tell him, I would say, this is not something, you can't continue living like this. And he would always kind of reassure me that, I'm just working on a project right now. It'll be done in a couple of weeks. Let me just finish this, and then afterwards things will be normal. It'll be manageable. It'll be okay. And he would kind of buy time with me by doing that. And every time a project would finish, a very short time would pass before he would have to take on another project. And this continued to the point where one day we were going to visit Marhum Ayatollah Khoshbakht, and she says that I was upset. I wanted to maybe just speak my mind a little bit with him. But in any case, in the session, if any of you know the sessions that this Ustad would conduct, the sessions had a very they had a small formal, but then the majority was an informal kind of question and answer sort of session where people would come and ask all sorts of questions, and he would address them in the public so people would benefit. So one of those questions, which I'm sure these kind of questions are asked all the time, they asked him, in your opinion, how close is the zuhur? How close is the reappearance? Many of our scholars, many of the urafa, asatid akhlaq, they ask him this question. And most of them, again, they answer with, it's very close. We should prepare ourselves, maybe in your lifetime, maybe in the lifetime of your children. Marhum Khoshbakht gave a very interesting answer. He said that he turned to this Shaheed Mustafa Ahmed al-Roshan. He said, it depends on how your work is progressing in Natanz, which is one of the sites of development. So she says that, after hearing something like this, I stopped complaining. And I stopped even in my heart complaining that really something like the reappearance of the Imam, this Ustad, this teacher, is saying is tied to the work that, my husband is doing. And that's why he took the work that he did so seriously. Yes, any of us can be invested in the work that we do. We can be workaholics. We can exhaust ourselves. And I would think more or less it's there for noble purposes. Either we want to provide for our families, we want to open doors for others, we want to be able to fund other projects. All of these are, meritorious actions. But there's something about working and knowing that your work is actually contributing towards the hastening of the reappearance, and that it is actually impacting in some direct way, in some measurable way, I guess, the establishment of this Husseini legacy, this Husseini mission of establishing or reestablishing human dignity, of establishing justice in its real sense, of fighting for human rights, and of the propagation and the establishment of a way of life that is meaningful and a way of life that is satisfactory to the human condition. And that is really at the crux of what Islam is, in its truest form, in its prophetic form. So when we speak about righteous action, I have to remind myself, because I think I get maybe sometimes confused, that, alhamdulillah, we're doing good things, some good actions are taking place. Again, I don't say any of these things to demotivate. No, we need work to be done at all levels. But kind of reminding ourselves of how high the potential is and what we can aspire to achieve if we really commit ourselves to serving that cause. And that way, though, we find, alhamdulillah, with the help and support of Allah, we do make some strides, that ultimately we're left unsatisfied until we are able to witness that ultimate victory. And that's why we have in our tradition that we ask Allah, in supplications like Dua Ahd, that if my life does not suffice, it does not extend to the time where the Imam will return and this final victory will be conducted, that I'd like to be extended that opportunity to come and be a witness of that. So that statement, that sentiment, I think really makes most sense to an individual that is sincerely committed to this project. I would hope someone like me that has made small and significant contributions would also be extended that opportunity. But I think first and foremost, it belongs to those individuals who understand really the I think that the great honor, the position of what it means to serve that cause, and to fully invest oneself. I don't call it sacrifice. There's no sacrifice there. It's really just an application of oneself in its truest form. So that's what I think about when I try to think about righteous action and amalun salih. These are all good, but perhaps they're lower manifestations of that. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ سَيَجْعَلُ لَهُمُ الرَّحْمَنُ وُدًّا. Indeed, those who have iman and they perform these righteous deeds, this amalun salih, Allah the All-Beneficent will endear them to His creation. I think once that amalun salih happens in its truest form, then that endearment will, of course, naturally occur too. There needs not be any sort of marketing or of branding or of exposure. None of these things need to happen. People already know what the source of that is, and they will be drawn towards it. Okay, so that's number two, kind of like a review and an expansion. The third element is the element, I call it comprehensiveness. We can also understand it as the notion of representation. Why is the Husseini movement so effective, so enticing? It's because it is comprehensive. It's comprehensive in a number of different ways. Number one is that I think it's representative of different people in society. I think it's diverse in that way. And we know that representation, it matters. Maybe not in the way sometimes that it's spoken about in popular discourse, but representation does matter. And especially for those of us who are impressionable, generally younger people are a lot more impressionable, but it doesn't mean that the young at heart are also not. But we know that those who are impressionable, they see around them positively or negatively. It shapes not only the way that they see the world, but it also shapes the expectations that they have for themselves and the expectations that they have for each other. What's unique about Karbala is that not only it has a message and a lesson that resonates with all people, and that's one facet of its comprehensiveness. It's not something that's unique to a certain group or to a certain time. It's a message that's universal, as we say. But it is also comprehensive in the fact that it involves agents and actors that are representative of most, if not all, in society. So the reason why this representation matters is, again, psychologically they say, if a person can see themselves in that phenomena, if they can see themselves in that story, and that's why they say relatability is so incredibly important in like storytelling, in creative storytelling. If the person can see themselves, then there is a connection made that they can be them. So for children, especially, like I said, they're impressionable. Their engagement that they have with life experiences, their engagement with media, their engagement with any avenue of information, more or less, it shapes the way they imagine to be possible for people to look at them, to live how they live where they live, or come where do they come from, or where they're going to go. What it means is that for many younger people, they determine, again, what they can be based on the examples that exist around them. And this is what I think makes Karbala special, is that it includes representatives from all different kind of like backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, racial background, religious backgrounds, gender, age, all those things. You have elders that are there, and with their struggles as elders, those struggles are brought to the fore and they are explained. And the challenge that those individuals make, that is also described. So you have elders there on the scene, and their story is relatable to those to others who find themselves represented in that, in that story. You have men, you have women, you have young, you have adolescent, you have children, you have babies, you have young men, young women. They're all represented. And again, like I said, once you get into the details of the story, the details really are what I think drives home that relatability and that representation. That they were people just like us. Yes, they belonged to a certain time. They belonged to a certain culture. Their life experiences were shaped by things that happened in history. They lived very close to the introduction of Islam. So yeah, much of their life was informed, if not completely defined by that. But still, there were people just like we are. There were men that had obligations. There were husbands. There were wives. There were children. There were younger people that had ambitions in life. There were individuals who were kind of averse to coming. There were those who were given the opportunity and they reciprocated, they accepted. There were those who were extended the opportunity and they rejected. You have all sorts of different people there. And then on the enemy side, you have the same thing. People that are there that they were complicit or they actively engaged in this heinous crime because of the same things that maybe you and I struggle with. Attachments to certain ways of life, attachments to certain pleasures or habits in life, and that really caused them to do something that was so inhumane. So this idea of comprehensiveness and representation, I think, is a really powerful part of not just the story of Karbala, but also in the telling of what makes this movement so powerful. And like I mentioned last night, other movements, because of the limited nature that they have, and much of it, perhaps this issue of comprehensiveness, they'll find themselves struggling. And that's why they must be kind of, they must be subsumed under a movement that's larger in scope and larger in its representational kind of capacity. So that's another really important thing. And the more we can work at seeing ourselves in that moment, the more that really helps us see ourselves producing or reproducing that in our lives and in our current context. That's really what's most important. Not to engage in a way that is disconnected, but to see ourselves in that moment. And I think once that happens, statements like, oh Imam, we wish we were with you so that we would achieve that victory or that felicity with you. Ya laytana kunna ma'akum fanafuzu ma'akum. I think that only makes sense when that element of representation and relatability is there. Otherwise, it's just kind of like, it's one of those things that are said, but it's not truly understood. What a person is saying. It's not appreciated. All right, so that's number 3. I'll just kind of move forward because I know we don't have much time. I'll just mention the fourth one very briefly, and inshallah we'll transition into a few minutes of Musiba for tonight, and we'll conclude this 3-night series tomorrow night. The fourth element, which is, I wouldn't say the most important, because the will of God is the most important, but probably after that, it's the element of leadership. No movement will be successful without qualified leadership, without strong leadership, without leadership of individuals who understand the importance of what they're doing, and they are best equipped to lead this movement and to lead this kind of struggle towards its destination. Without that, you can have great ideas, you can have great theory, but in implementation, you'll find yourselves lacking. And history tells us that. Even right now, one of the main things that I think we struggle with in the implementation or the enforcement of either what we call our way of life, or at least the ideas that we have for the fight for the restoration of humanity, it's just leadership. It's kind of like we know what to do, and we kind of know how to do it, but we're all left wondering why we're not doing it. And then when we look to ourselves and say, well, I can be a great follower, but I don't know if I'm a great leader. And we have all these kind of like these anxieties of, well, if I take on a leadership position, then, you know, all the things that can go wrong, we focus on those. I'm not saying that we should not respect the position of leadership. We should take it lightly. I'm not saying that, but there needs to be some sort of plan for the development of leaders, right? And one of the things that leaders need to have is the characteristic of courage. And you know, even if we look at traditional philosophical thought, Greek thought, Aristotle called courage the first virtue. It makes all other virtues possible. So the leader, it's not for the leader to be, you know, irresponsible. It's not for the leader necessarily to have to wear their, you know, their heart on their sleeve. It's not about that. It's not about being irrationally passionate. No. There needs to be passion. There needs to be some fervor, some energy. But there also needs to be that element of courage. The courage not only to know what to do, but the courage of doing it. We need that badly. If you look in other systems, in other structures, I'm not saying they're good systems or structures, but many of them will have some framework for training their future leaders. Just look at the political system in this country. There are avenues for the grooming of tomorrow's leaders. There's certain institutions, there's certain schools that they go to, there's certain social circles. They know these are the people that are going to be, you know, in positions of power. They train them a certain way, to think a certain way, to act a certain way, to believe in certain things, to think of themselves in certain ways, to think of people in certain ways. They're grooming their leaders. So if we're thinking about, again, contribution towards the Husseini movement, alayhi salam, then, you know, what is our approach towards the importance of leadership, number one? And again, like I said, just resist this hesitation to outsource that to the imam. Yes, the imam is the leader. Of course, we take that, you know, no one questions that. But there needs to be a network of leadership, correct? So that network of leadership exists how? We have to make our best efforts in understanding what the leader represents and trying our best to train ourselves and others to be leaders. And then also having just some level of appreciation for what leadership looks like in the world that we live in. The humility that a position of leadership is difficult, number one. And number two, to understand the position that a leader, you know, occupies. What that means. I'm not saying lend support to any leader because being a leader is hard, therefore you shouldn't be critical and you shouldn't, you know, express your grievances. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that doing khuruj is unacceptable or it's, you know, outside of the bounds of the religion or the tradition. I'm not saying anything like that. But what I am saying is when you have those kind of basic elements and there is, you know, an initiative being made towards leadership and towards inspiring a certain type of leadership, at least let's try and understand that, and maybe we'll lend appreciation and support to it with our criticisms, with our constructive criticisms. But remember, we need that. Without leadership, nothing will happen. And I just find it, you know, completely unacceptable that all leadership models will fail until the imam comes and he will establish any and all leadership models. It just seems so, defeatist. It's like you can't do anything because you're so incompetent. Don't even try. No, try. Try to put into practice those things that you know to be right. And then the support of Allah will be there. The support of the imam will be there. I think this is really something that we struggle with. And we are seeing the detrimental effects of that all the way to those, those needs that we have in our daily lives, let alone the big picture stuff. The big picture stuff, we know we're struggling, let alone the small things in our daily lives that we need. But there's an effect. There, you know, that attitude and that mentality or that sense of being neglectful or being pessimistic, or being or only engaging in destructive criticism, the end of that will only be the things that we're seeing. So, may Allah lend support to those who are thinking about what leadership looks like and constructing models of leadership. May Allah correct them in their missteps, in their mistakes, in their shortcomings. And may Allah inspire kind of like an open mind and open heart and appreciation for those who are observing them, so that this model of leadership can, generation after generation, produce better and better and better leaders. I think that's the only kind of way we move forward. Not we sit, kind of with a mentality of being defeated. Like I said, the will of Allah is for this victory to occur, and this victory is occurring. So how do we draw inspiration from that to ensure that we are lending support to the construction of leadership models and the grooming and training of leaders for today and leaders for tomorrow, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum, ya Aba Abdullah. Of all the musibah that can be recited, the most painful musibahs, masa'ib, are those that Ahlul Bayt alayhimu salatu wassalam recite themselves. This is a tradition that we know. We're following in the footsteps of Ahlul Bayt, that they were adamant that those who had heard the story of the tragedy of Karbala, that they tell that story in the form of poetry. But even Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wassalam, they also share this experience for us, and we hear it through their accounts. I find them to be of the most difficult and tragic. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad wa ajjil farajahum la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah al-ali al-azim. It is narrated that when the caravan of Ahlul Bayt is returning to Medina after this long journey, one would think that when the Ahlul Bayt returns, even though they experienced all this hardship and struggle and loss and grief, that the return to Medina would bring some comfort and safety to their hearts. It is narrated that when the caravan of Ahlul Bayt reaches the outskirts of Medina, the walls of the city are visible. Our Lady Kulthum recites these lines of poetry of musibah for what this caravan has witnessed throughout this journey. مدينة جدنا لا تقبلينا فبالحسرات والأحزان جئنا. O Medina of our grandfather, do not accept us, for we have returned with grief, sorrow, being pained and distressed. ألا فأخبر رسول الله عنا بأننا قد فجعنا في أبينا. Yes, inform the Messenger of Allah that we are shocked for the loss of our father's disappearance. وأن رجالنا بالطف سرعا بلا رؤس وقد ذبحوا البنينا. Inform our dearest Messenger, our grandfather, that the bodies of our family members are still at the land of Taf in Karbala. Their heads were separated and the enemies have slaughtered our children. What else should they tell the Prophet? وأخبر جدنا أن أسرنا وبعد الأسر يا جدا سبينا. Tell our grandfather that we were captivated and driven like prisoners and were humiliated. ورهتك يا رسول الله أضحى عرايا بالطفوف مسلبين. O Rasulullah, the bodies of your family are placed uncovered, their goods looted from their bodies. وقد ذبحوا الحسين ولم يراعوا جنابك يا رسول الله فينا. These enemies attacked Imam al-Hussein as beasts. They slaughtered him. They did not consider us exclusively with your special reverence of blood relation. فلو نظرت عيونك للأسارى على أقطاب الجمال محملين. Perhaps, O Messenger, you observed us as hostages who were ill-treated. We were forced to sit on the bare backs of the camels. رسول الله بعد الصون صارت عيون الناس ناظرة إلينا. O Messenger of Allah, after strict observation of the hijab, the haunted eyes of the people stared at us without hesitation. The enemies making us victims of torture. وَكُنْتَ تَحُوطُنَا حَتَّى تَوَلَّتْ عيونك ثارت الأعداء علينا. You have protected us greatly, but as soon as you closed your eyes, O Messenger, these enemies attacked us. أفاطم لو نذرت إلى السبايا بناتك في البلاد مشتتين. O Fatima, our mother, perhaps you could observe your imprisoned daughters who were pulled from city to city and town to town uncovered. أفاطم لو نذرت إلى الحيارى ولو أبصرت زين العابدين. Our mother Fatima, perhaps you watched your children in distress. Perhaps you observed the condition of Zainul Abidin. أفاطم لو رأيتينا سهارا ومن سهر الليالي قد عمينا. Oh mother, perhaps you watch how we spent these nights without sleep that ultimately led to our blindness. أفاطم ما لقيت من إعداك ولا قيرات مما قد لقينا. O Fatima, from the hands of the enemies you did not face musibah, even to an atom's weight which came upon us. فلو دامت حياتك لم تزالي إلى يوم القيامة تندبينا. If you were alive at that time and be immortal, then you would be continually weeping for us till the day of judgment. She continues these accounts. وهذه قصتي مع شرح حالي ألا يا سامعون ابكوا علينا. This is our detailed account of our journey, O listener. Lament upon us and shed tears. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. عدم الله لكم الأجر. ماتم حسين.
From Karbala, Karbala, Karbala to Karbala, 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 I left my heart in Karbala. From Karbala, Karbala, Karbala to Karbala, 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 I left my heart in Karbala. The luminous moon lighting the way, the rising sun that brightens the day. Heaven without you would be in flames. You're the heaven in Karbala. The luminous moon lighting the way, the rising sun that brightens the day. Heaven without you would be in flames. You're the heaven in Karbala. Your visitors offer you their hands. Enemies will never understand. How can the water lose to the sand? How can the thirst win in Karbala? Why heaven is open, Ya Hussein? Why angels descending, Ya Hussein? Why they are residing in Karbala? Why heaven is open, Ya Hussein? Why angels descending, Ya Hussein? Why they are residing in Karbala? From Karbala, Karbala, Karbala to Karbala, Karbala, Karbala. I left my heart in Karbala. From Karbala, Karbala, Karbala to Karbala, Karbala, Karbala. I left my heart in Karbala. The hand of God that nurtures the young, speaking for Allah, you were the tongue, separating his rights from the wrong, elevated in Karbala. The hand of God that nurtures the young, speaking for Allah, you were the tongue, separating his rights from the wrong, elevated in Karbala. The ship that sails swiftly through the waves, and whoever boards your ship is safe, immune from the punishment of the grave. Whoever mourned you in Karbala, when will we meet again, Ya Hussein? When under your dome will I grieve again? From Najaf will I walk to Karbala? When will we meet again, Ya Hussein? When under your dome will I grieve again? From Najaf will I walk to Karbala? From Karbala, Karbala, Karbala to Karbala, Karbala, Karbala. I left my heart in Karbala. From Karbala, Karbala, Karbala to Karbala, Karbala, Karbala. I left my heart in Karbala. From Karbala, Karbala, Karbala to Karbala, Karbala, Karbala. I left my heart in Karbala. I left my heart in Karbala. I left my heart in Karbala. It's in Karbala. Ya Hussein, 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 Ya Hussein.
Assalamu alayka ya Rasul Allah. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا حسن بن علي. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين وعلى جميع شهداء كربلاء خصوصا أبا الفضل العباس. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا علي بن الحسين زين العابدين. السلام عليك يا إمام محمد الباقر علم النبيين. السلام عليك يا إمام جعفر الصادق. السلام عليك يا إمام موسى الكاظم. السلام عليك يا إمام علي بن موسى الرضا. السلام عليك يا إمام محمد بن علي الجواد. السلام عليك يا إمام علي بن محمد الهادي. السلام عليك يا إمام حسن بن علي الزكي العسكري. السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والزمان. الأمان 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 من فتنة الزمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. أجرك الله يا بقية الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بالنبي وآله رحم الله من يقرأ الفاتحة مع الصلوات. اللهم